Hi, I'm Swoosie Kurtz, and you're watching Delmarva Life.
Is it just me or she's gotten more cute as she ages?
Adorable. I want to just hang out with her.
She is cool. You know, since the 1920s, the name Perdue has been synonymous with chicken. Early on, the company sold eggs, then chicken for consumption. Today, Perdue Farms is one of the top poultry companies in the world.
And although the company has gone through some growth and some changes, one thing has stayed the same: its roots here on Delmarva. Perdue President and CEO Jim Perdue was born into the chicken industry.
I grew up right across the street, 50 yards from the office. And so, the feed mill at the time was right behind the office. And that was the company. And then the hatchery was right next to our house. So everything was right there. You know, the feed mill was kind of the playground.
In fact, this now famous picture of Jim, his father Frank, and his grandfather Arthur Perdue was taken in that hatchery.
That's a still picture, but there's actually a video. And what's funny is I'm holding up some baby chicks and they drop. And I'm kind of hesitant as to whether I'm supposed to reach down and pick them up. That's Arthur Perdue right there.
Jim says he spent a lot of time with his grandfather growing up.
He's just a really God-fearing. I mean, he was a member of 2 churches and just a really gentle person.
At the time that Jim went off to college to pursue a career in biology, Perdue Farms was a fairly small company with just the one processing plant in Salisbury. But that changed.
My competitors figure it's my advertising that's responsible for my success.
Jim's father, Frank, started showing up in national ads. Perdue was the first poultry company to brand itself and start advertising. And Frank, well, he was the first CEO to double as the company spokesperson.
That's something a lot of these other guys are going to have to learn.
Of course, after that, Lee Iacocca and Victor Kayam and Dave at Wendy's, and it sort of started becoming more and more of a thing.
And as the company started to grow, so did Frank's desire to have Jim join.
Meet my son, Jim. He may be even tougher than I am.
Not until I was in college that the talking began and the selling began. Dad was a pretty good salesperson. And he got much more intense as I became a senior.
But Jim's interest lay not on land, but sea.
I really had an interest in growing animals in the sea, aquaculture. So when I left, that's what I did. I pursued, got a master's in marine biology and studied shrimp.
Jim eventually did make it back to Perdue and in 1991 became chairman of the company.
I hate to do this, but you know the rules.
He even took over the spokesperson responsibilities, and thanks to America's love of chicken, Perdue continued to grow.
Starting back in the 80s, all the way up through the 90s, chicken was growing at 5% a year, chicken consumption. It surpassed beef in the 90s, which was unheard of. And so we were chasing demand as an industry, and then as a branded company, we were chasing demand, which makes it very easy to grow because, you know, the demand keeps going up.
Eventually, the demand leveled off and even dropped as a result of the recession in 2008.
Well, that's a very different, situation. Because now if you're going to grow, you're going to have to take market share from somebody else because there's not new consumers. This is the piece of wood that we found in the renovation behind this fireplace.
And with that kind of competitive climate, Perdue says it's good to remember the roots his grandfather established. In fact, the house that Arthur built in 1917 across the street from corporate offices has been renovated to its original state. A picture of the house is also on the company's packaging. In an industry where 75% of the business is owned by companies outside of the U.S., the family image is important.
We try to run the company like a family business. But when I grew up in that house, I mean, it was 100 people in the company. And there would be a softball game every day in good weather behind the hatchery. And the whole company would participate in that. And there would be picnics, we'd go to Assateague and boats and on weekends. I mean, it really was a family, but obviously we have 20,000 people in 13 states, and it's very difficult to be that intimate, you know, with everybody.
And now the 4th generation is stepping in.
We have 4, what we call G4s, 4th generation in the business. I have my sister's son, my nephew, is in sales, and Mitzi's son, Carlos, runs the international side. I have a son that runs the pet treat program, and then I have a younger son who's in operations right now down at the Salisbury plant. So we've got 4 that are participating.
Something Jim says is very important.
I think we're all stewards. You know, we all have a role and responsibility, and that's to make sure we, in our case, we want to try to continue to have the family, be in family hands.
Family that he says will stay rooted on Delmarva, making Jim Perdue and the Perdue family a Delmarva treasure.
And Jim told me that Frank's widow, Mitzi Perdue, is currently working on a book about Frank Perdue. Also, we mentioned that Jim took over the TV commercials from his dad. He still does the commercials, but it's only his voice. Jim is now an animated character in those commercials, and he says he likes that because he no longer ages on TV. Isn't that clever?
Is he as neat a guy as it seems
He
like
is. He really is. I enjoyed the afternoon we spent.
Well, from one famous face to another famous face, Swoosie Kurtz has entertained audiences both on the screen and on the stage, and now she's adding something else to her resume. She joins us next to talk about her latest adventure.
We'll also hear from one of the world's best-selling authors, Mary Higgins Clark. Find out what connection she has to Delmarva. Delmarva Life, we'll be right back.